Marcus Sterling adjusted his $5,000 suit for the third time as he stared at the sleek VR headset sitting on his mahogany desk. At 28, he was the youngest billionaire in Silicon Valley, having built Neuralink Technologies from his dorm room into a global empire worth $12 billion. Yet here he was, about to do something that would either revolutionize online dating or completely humiliate him. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sir, the development team is ready for the beta test, his assistant Jennifer announced through the intercom. Marcus picked up the headset, its weight somehow feeling heavier than the responsibility of running a Fortune 500 company. Little did he know that in the next few hours, his perfectly controlled world would collide with a struggling programmer named Emma Rodriguez, whose brilliant mind was about to create something that would change both their lives forever. The conference room buzzed with nervous energy as Marcus entered, flanked by his development team. At the head of the polished glass table sat Dr. Sarah Chen, Neuralink's head of research, surrounded by screens displaying complex algorithms and user interface mockups. "Gentlemen, ladies," Marcus began, his voice carrying the authority that had commanded respect from investors and competitors alike. "Project Cupid represents our next major venture into the relationship technology sector. But before we launch this VR dating platform to the public, I want to ensure it actually works." Dr. Chen stood up, adjusting her glasses. "Sir, the AI algorithms are designed to create personalized romantic scenarios based on psychological profiles, past relationship data, and emotional responses. Each user experiences a completely customized virtual environment." "And the safety protocols?" Marcus asked, though his mind was already made up about what he intended to do. "All interactions are monitored, and users can exit at any time. However," Dr. Chen paused, "we haven't tested it on someone with your specific profile yet." Marcus had built his fortune on taking calculated risks, but this felt different. For years, his romantic life had been a series of strategic arrangements and gold diggers attracted to his wealth. Every woman he dated seemed more interested in his bank account than in who he actually was beneath the designer suits and luxury lifestyle. "I'll be the test subject," Marcus declared, ignoring the shocked expressions around the table. "But here's the catch. I don't want the AI to know who I am. Create a false profile. Make me ordinary." Jennifer, who had been taking notes, looked up sharply. "Sir, that could compromise the algorithm's ability to create your optimal match." Quote, "Exactly the point," Marcus replied with a slight smile. "I want to know if this system can help someone find genuine connection, not just cater to wealth and status." Dr. Chen exchanged glances with her team. "What kind of profile did you have in mind?" Marcus had thought about this extensively. "Make me a mid-level software developer, someone struggling financially, maybe living paycheck to paycheck. Give me a modest apartment, a used car, student debt, the works. I want to experience what dating is like for regular people." The room fell silent. The idea of their billionaire CEO pretending to be financially struggling seemed almost absurd, yet there was something compelling about the authenticity of the experiment. "Sir," Dr. Chen said carefully, "you understand that the AI will match you with someone who fits that demographic profile. You might be paired with someone who's actually experiencing financial hardship." "Even better," Marcus replied. "I want to see if real connection can transcend economic circumstances." 3 hours later, Marcus found himself in the testing chamber, a soundproof room equipped with the most advanced VR technology money could buy. The walls were lined with sensors that would monitor everything from his heart rate to micro-expressions, feeding data back to the AI system. As he slipped on the headset, Dr. Chen's voice came through the speakers. "Remember, your virtual identity is Jake Morrison, 26 years old, software developer at a small tech startup in Portland. You share a cramped apartment with 2 roommates, drive a 2015 Honda Civic, and you're paying off student loans. The AI has created a complete backstory, including memories and experiences that will feel completely real once you're in the system." "How will I know what's real and what's simulated?" Marcus asked. "That's the beauty of our technology," Dr. Chen explained. "Your brain won't be able to distinguish between virtual memories and real ones while you're connected. You'll genuinely believe you're Jake Morrison." The last thing Marcus saw was the blinking light on the headset before the world dissolved into digital particles. When consciousness returned, he was standing in a small, cluttered apartment that smelled faintly of instant ramen and coffee. Sunlight streamed through windows that needed cleaning, illuminating furniture that looked like it had been purchased from thrift stores and garage sales. On the desk sat an aging laptop covered in programming stickers, and on the wall hung a diploma from Oregon State University next to a stack of unpaid bills. For a moment, panic flashed through him. Where was his penthouse? His collection of vintage watches? Then the artificial memories kicked in, and suddenly he remembered. This was his life. He was Jake Morrison, and he'd been living here for 2 years, splitting rent 3 ways just to afford this place. His phone buzzed with a notification from the VMatch app, the same dating platform his company was about to launch, though in reality, he had no connection to Neuralink Technologies. New match found, the notification read. Emma R. has created a personalized world for you. Would you like to enter? Jake, as he now fully believed himself to be, opened the app. Emma's profile was refreshingly honest. No filtered photos or exaggerated accomplishments. Just a simple picture of a young woman with warm brown eyes and a genuine smile, sitting in what looked like a coding workspace filled with multiple monitors and empty energy drink cans. Her bio read, Indie game developer and VR programmer. I believe the best relationships are built in spaces where people can be completely themselves. I've created something special, a world where we can meet without pretense or pressure. If you're tired of superficial connections and want to experience something real, let's build something beautiful together. Below her profile was a simple button, Enter Emma's World. Jake felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Genuine curiosity about another person that had nothing to do with networking or business opportunities. This woman wasn't trying to impress him with designer clothes or expensive hobbies. She was offering something far more valuable, authenticity. He pressed the button. The apartment dissolved around him, replaced by a breathtaking virtual landscape that defied the laws of physics. He stood on a floating island, suspended in a star-filled sky, connected to other islands by bridges made of pure light. In the distance, he could see a cozy cabin with warm lights spilling from its windows. Welcome to my sanctuary, a voice said behind him. Jake turned to see Emma materializing from particles of light, her avatar matching her profile picture but somehow more radiant in this digital space. She wore simple clothes, jeans and a vintage band t-shirt, and her hair moved naturally in a gentle breeze that carried the scent of jasmine. This is incredible, Jake said, his voice filled with genuine wonder. Did you code all of this yourself? Emma smiled, and he noticed how her eyes lit up when she talked about her work. Every line of code, every texture, every physics simulation. It took me 6 months working nights and weekends. I wanted to create a space where people could connect without the noise of the real world. No job titles, no bank accounts, just us. As they walked toward the cabin, Jake found himself sharing things he'd never told anyone. Not about his wealth or success, because in this moment he genuinely believed he was a struggling programmer, but about his real feelings of loneliness, his desire for authentic connection, his dreams that had nothing to do with money. I've always felt like people see what they want to see when they look at me, Jake confessed as they sat on the cabin's porch, watching digital fireflies dance in the twilight. Like I'm wearing a mask I can't take off. Emma nodded thoughtfully. That's why I created this place. Here, we're not our job titles or our bank accounts or our social media profiles. We're just souls, I guess, connecting on the most fundamental level. For the next several hours, they talked about everything and nothing. Emma showed him the intricate details she'd programmed into this world, how the grass responded to their footsteps, how the stars formed constellations that told stories, how the cabin's fireplace created real warmth that somehow translated through the VR interface. You're brilliant, Jake said, meaning every word. This level of programming, I've never seen anything like it. Emma blushed, a reaction that seemed so natural he forgot they were in a virtual space. I'm actually struggling to find work in my field. Most companies want experienced developers, and I can't afford the certification programs that would prove my skills. This world, it's kind of my portfolio and my escape rolled into one. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Jake felt a strange impulse, something the real Marcus Sterling would have acted on immediately. He wanted to help her. to connect her with opportunities, to ensure her talent didn't go unrecognized. But as Jake Morrison, he had no power to change her circumstances. He was just another struggling programmer who could offer only emotional support and genuine appreciation for her work. "Emma," he said carefully, "what if I told you that talent like yours doesn't go unnoticed forever? That sometimes the universe has a way of connecting the right people at the right time?" She looked at him with those warm brown eyes, and for a moment he saw something deeper. Hope mixed with resignation, brilliance tempered by circumstance. "I'd say you're either very optimistic or very naive," she replied with a soft laugh. "But I appreciate the sentiment." As their virtual date continued, Jake found himself falling for someone in a way he'd never experienced. Not because of what Emma could do for him or how she might fit into his lifestyle, but because of who she was. Brilliant, authentic, vulnerable, and real in a way that transcended the digital space she'd created. Neither of them knew that outside the virtual world, Dr. Chen was monitoring the session with growing amazement, watching as Marcus Sterling's vital signs showed emotional responses unlike anything in his psychological profile. The AI algorithms were working better than they'd ever hoped, but they were also recording something unprecedented. A billionaire's CEO genuinely connecting with someone based purely on intellectual and emotional compatibility. What none of them realized was that Emma Rodriguez wasn't just any random user. She was a freelance programmer who had been hired months earlier by a Neuralink subcontractor to help develop the very VR dating system Marcus was now testing. In the real world, she had unknowingly helped create the technology that was bringing them together while struggling to pay her rent and wondering if her programming skills would ever be enough to change her circumstances. The perfect trap had been set, but the question remained, who was really catching whom? 3 weeks had passed since Jake Morrison first entered Emma's virtual sanctuary, and what began as a single experimental session had evolved into a nightly digital rendezvous that left Marcus Sterling questioning everything he thought he knew about love and connection. Each evening at exactly 7 p.m., Marcus would slip away from board meetings and investor calls, claiming urgent product development reviews. In reality, he was rushing to the testing chamber, desperate to return to the world where he was just Jake, a man whose biggest worry was whether his laptop would survive another month, not whether his next acquisition would affect global markets. Tonight was different. Emma had messaged him with unusual excitement, "I've been working on something special. Meet me at the lighthouse tonight?" The lighthouse was a new addition to Emma's ever-expanding virtual world. Over their weeks together, Jake had watched her creativity flourish as she added new locations, a jazz club where the music responded to their emotions, a library filled with books that wrote themselves based on their conversations, gardens where flowers bloomed in patterns that reflected their shared memories. But Emma didn't know that each innovation she created was being automatically documented and analyzed by Neuralink systems. Her code was so elegant, so revolutionary in its approach to emotional VR interaction, that Dr. Chen had begun calling it impossible programming. The algorithms Emma wrote shouldn't have worked with Neuralink's base systems, yet somehow they not only functioned but created experiences more immersive than anything the company's $50 million development budget had produced. "Sir, we need to discuss the implications of this extended testing," Dr. Chen had warned Marcus that morning. "The user Emma Rodriguez has essentially reverse-engineered and improved our core technology. Legal is asking questions about intellectual property rights." Marcus had dismissed the concerns with a wave of his hand, but now, as Jake materialized on the lighthouse platform, he couldn't shake the feeling that the walls between his two worlds were becoming dangerously thin. Emma was waiting for him, her avatar more detailed than ever before. She'd spent hours perfecting the way virtual moonlight caught her hair, how her smile created subtle lighting changes in the environment around them. "Jake, I have something to tell you," she began, her voice carrying a mixture of excitement and nervousness that made his digital heart race. "I've been offered a job." The words hit him like a physical blow. That's wonderful," he managed, though the Jake Morrison part of his personality felt genuine panic at the thought of losing her. "Virtual Reality Solutions wants me to lead their new emotional AI division. The salary would change everything. I could pay off my debts, move out of my shared apartment, maybe even start my own studio someday." Emma's eyes sparkled with possibilities that Jake desperately wanted to support, even as Marcus Sterling's subconscious recognized the company name as a major Neuralink competitor. "When would you start?" Jake asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "That's the thing," Emma said, moving closer to him on the lighthouse platform. "They want me to relocate to Seattle immediately. The project is so secretive they won't even tell me what I'd be working on until I sign the contract." Jake felt the virtual world spinning around him. In the real world, Marcus Sterling could have made a single phone call to ensure Emma got a better offer anywhere she wanted. He could have hired her at Neuralink, with a salary that would make Virtual Reality's offer look like pocket change. But Jake Morrison had no such power. He was just another struggling programmer, watching the woman he was falling for slip away to pursue opportunities he couldn't provide. "There's more," Emma continued, her avatar taking his hands in a gesture that felt impossibly real. "I've been thinking about us, about this connection we have. I know we've never met in the real world, but what we've built here feels more genuine than anything I've experienced outside VR." "Emma, Let me finish," she interrupted gently. "I want to meet you, really meet you, face to face, in the real world. I know it's scary. What if the magic doesn't translate? What if we're too different outside of this perfect digital space I've created? But I think what we have is worth the risk." Jake stared into her eyes, seeing hope and vulnerability and trust that made his chest tighten with emotions he couldn't fully process. The woman he was falling in love with wanted to meet the man he was pretending to be, never knowing that the real version of him lived in a world so far removed from hers that their connection would likely crumble under the weight of reality. "I want that too," he heard himself saying, the words coming from a place deeper than Marcus Sterling's calculated decision-making. More than anything, Emma's smile could have powered the virtual lighthouse for 1,000 years. "Really? You're not just saying that because you think it's what I want to hear." "Emma, being with you, even like this, even in a digital space, has shown me what I've been missing my entire life. You see me in a way no one ever has." It was true, though not in the way she understood it. Emma saw Jake Morrison, the struggling programmer who quoted obscure coding languages like poetry and dreamed of building something meaningful despite financial constraints. She had no idea she was falling for a carefully constructed fiction, or that the man behind the avatar possessed the resources to fulfill every dream she'd ever shared with him. "I have to take the Seattle job," Emma said quietly. "The opportunity is too good to pass up, and honestly, I need the money. But maybe you could consider relocating too. I know it's a lot to ask, especially with your financial situation, but Seattle has a great tech scene. You could find something there." Jake nodded, though he knew the impossibility of what she was suggesting. Marcus Sterling couldn't simply disappear to Seattle without triggering a media frenzy and corporate chaos. But more importantly, if they met in the real world, how long before Emma discovered the truth about who he really was? "When do you leave?" he asked. 2 weeks. "But Jake, I want to see you before then." "Can we meet? Maybe just for coffee? I need to know that this isn't all just digital delusion." The request hung in the virtual air between them like a challenge that could destroy everything they'd built together. Jake Morrison would have jumped at the chance, but Marcus Sterling knew that meeting her would either require maintaining an elaborate deception or revealing a truth that would likely end everything beautiful they'd created. "Of course," he heard himself agreeing. "Let's meet." Meanwhile, in the real world, Dr. Chen was monitoring the session with growing concern. Marcus's physiological responses were showing signs of genuine emotional attachment that went far beyond the scope of a product test. His heart rate, brain activity, and stress hormones all indicated that he was experiencing the kind of deep, romantic connection that the VR system was designed to facilitate, but with a level of intensity that suggested he was losing the ability to distinguish between his virtual and real identities. "Jennifer," Dr. Chen called Marcus's assistant, "we may have a problem. How long has Mr. Sterling been running these extended VR sessions?" Jennifer consulted her tablet. "Every night for 3 weeks, usually 4 to 6 hours at a time. He's canceled 17 meetings and postponed 2 board presentations." "Should I be concerned?" Dr. Chen looked at the biometric readings scrolling across her screen. "I think our boss is falling in love with a user who doesn't know who he really is. And tomorrow, she's going to ask him to meet her in the real world." Back in the virtual lighthouse, Jake and Emma were planning their first real-world encounter, neither knowing that Emma Rodriguez was about to come face to face with the billionaire CEO whose technology had brought them together, or that Marcus Sterling was about to risk everything he'd built for a love that might not survive the transition from virtual reality to actual reality. "There's a coffee shop on 5th Street, Emma was saying, her avatar glowing with excitement and nervousness. "Been there, done that. It's quiet, casual, perfect for whatever this turns out to be. Tomorrow at 2? Jake suggested, though he had no idea how Marcus Sterling was going to become Jake Morrison for an afternoon without completely upending his carefully controlled existence. "Tomorrow at 2, Emma agreed, leaning in to give him a virtual kiss that somehow felt more real than any physical contact Marcus had experienced in years. As the session ended and Marcus returned to his penthouse reality, he stared at his reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Tomorrow, he would either have to break Emma's heart by standing her up, or find a way to meet her while maintaining the fiction that he was just another struggling programmer. What he didn't know was that Emma Rodriguez was facing her own impossible choice, whether to tell Jake Morrison that she'd been offered the virtual reality position, specifically because they'd discovered her unauthorized improvements to what they believed was experimental, open-source VR technology. Technology that actually belonged to Neuralink, the company whose CEO she was unknowingly falling in love with. Both of them were about to discover that some deceptions, no matter how well-intentioned, have consequences that extend far beyond the digital worlds where they're born. 6 months after the coffee shop revelation that changed everything, Emma Rodriguez stood in the executive boardroom of Neuralink Technologies, presenting her revolutionary Emoticore system to a room full of investors who hung on her every word. Her presentation wasn't just about code and algorithms, it was about the future of human connection in an increasingly digital world. Traditional VR dating platforms treat users like data points, Emma explained, her confidence radiating as she gestured to holographic displays showing user engagement statistics that defied industry standards. Emoticore recognizes that authentic emotional connection can't be programmed. It can only be facilitated by technology that adapts to the unique psychological fingerprint of each relationship. Marcus watched from his seat at the head of the table, still amazed by how dramatically their lives had intertwined. The woman who had unknowingly improved his company's core technology while struggling to pay rent was now Neuralink's chief innovation officer, commanding a salary that had allowed her to purchase her own studio apartment and finally pursue her master's degree in emotional AI. But more importantly, she was the woman who woke up beside him each morning in the penthouse they now shared, bringing a warmth to his previously sterile world that no amount of wealth could have purchased. The beta test results speak for themselves, Emma continued, clicking to a slide that showed success rates unprecedented in the dating app industry. Couples who met through Emoticore show a 94% satisfaction rate after 6 months, compared to 31% for traditional dating platforms. But perhaps more significantly, users report feeling more authentic and emotionally secure in their real-world relationships. One of the investors, Margaret Chen from Horizon Ventures, leaned forward with interest. "Bals, Rodriguez, these numbers seem almost too good to be true. What's your secret?" Emma's eyes found Marcus across the room, and for a moment, the professional presentation fell away, replaced by the intimate understanding they'd built together. "The secret is that Emoticore doesn't try to create perfect matches based on superficial compatibility. Instead, it creates environments where people can discover who they really are beneath their social masks, then facilitates connections based on those authentic selves." She clicked to the next slide, showing a complex neural network diagram. Every virtual environment is co-created by both users, requiring them to collaborate, compromise, and reveal their true creative instincts. The AI doesn't match personalities. It provides the tools for personalities to match themselves. Marcus smiled, remembering how Emma's lighthouse had evolved over their months together, becoming not just her creation, but truly theirs. Even now, they still meet there sometimes, not because they needed the virtual space to connect, but because it had become sacred ground where their love story began. "The financial projections are equally impressive," Emma said, transitioning to business metrics. "Conservative estimates suggest Emoticore could capture 40% of the online dating market within 3 years, generating revenue streams that extend far beyond subscription fees." The emotional AI technology has applications in therapy, education, corporate team building, and long-distance relationship maintenance. Dr. Sarah Chen, who had overseen the original project, stood up from her position near the back of the room. Emma, I have to ask, how did you develop such sophisticated emotional modeling algorithms? The mathematical frameworks you're using didn't exist in any published research when you created the original code. It was a question Emma had anticipated, though the real answer still seemed impossible even to her. The algorithms evolved through thousands of hours of real-world testing, with actual users experiencing genuine emotional connections. Each interaction taught the system something new about how human feelings translate into digital spaces. She paused, looking directly at Marcus. I had a very dedicated test subject who helped me understand that technology doesn't create love. It just removes the barriers that prevent love from flourishing naturally. Quote, the presentation concluded to enthusiastic applause, but as the investors filed out discussing acquisition offers and partnership deals, Emma and Marcus remained in the now empty boardroom, the weight of how far they'd traveled together settling between them. You know, Marcus said, loosening his tie as he walked over to where she stood by the window, when I first put on that VR headset, I thought I was testing a product. I never imagined I was actually auditioning for the role of test subject in my own love story. Emma laughed, the sound filling the corporate space with warmth that no interior designer could have achieved. If someone had told me that the struggling programmer I fell for in my virtual lighthouse was actually the billionaire CEO whose company I was unknowingly improving, I would have recommended therapy. And yet here we are, Marcus said, wrapping his arms around her waist and pulling her close. The CEO and the programmer who accidentally revolutionized an entire industry while falling in love. Speaking of which, Emma said, pulling away slightly with a mischievous smile, I have a surprise for you. She led him to her laptop and opened a new VR environment she'd been secretly developing. The screen showed a familiar virtual space, their lighthouse, but with new additions that made Marcus's breath catch. Emma, what is this? Our wedding venue, she said simply. I know we've talked about having a traditional ceremony, but I thought we should also have one in the place where we first fell in love. Dr. Chen has agreed to officiate virtually, and we can invite our friends and family to join us in the digital space. Marcus stared at the screen, seeing how she'd transformed their intimate lighthouse into something that could accommodate dozens of avatars while maintaining the sacred intimacy of their original meeting place. Floating gardens surrounded the lighthouse platform, connected by bridges of light that pulsed gently with heartbeat rhythms. In the distance, he could see avatar customization stations where their guests could design their virtual appearances. You want to get married twice? He asked, though his heart was already racing with excitement at the idea. I want to honor both versions of our love story, Emma explained. The real-world us who learned to navigate the complexities of your billionaire lifestyle and my newfound career success, and the virtual us who fell in love based purely on who we were when all the external pressures fell away. Marcus turned from the screen to look at the woman who had changed everything about his understanding of connection and authenticity. Emma Rodriguez, will you marry me in both realities? I thought you'd never ask, she replied, standing on her toes to kiss him with the same passion that had first ignited in pixels and code. 3 weeks later, the lighthouse wedding became the stuff of technology legend. 50 guests attended virtually, their avatars gathering on the floating platforms Emma had designed for the ceremony. Marcus's grandmother, despite being in her 80s, had insisted on learning VR technology so she could witness her grandson's happiness firsthand. Emma's family, initially bewildered by the concept of a virtual wedding, found themselves charmed by the magical environment their daughter had created. Dr. Chen, appearing as an avatar in flowing robes that defied virtual physics, conducted the ceremony while millions of Neuralink users worldwide watched the live stream, seeing the culmination of the love story that had inadvertently created their favorite dating platform. Marcus Sterling and Emma Rodriguez, Dr. Chen announced to the virtual gathering, your love story began with deception, flourished through authenticity, and now continues as a testament to the fact that real connection transcends any medium through which it's expressed. As they exchanged vows they'd written together, promises that acknowledged both their virtual beginning and their commitment to building a real-world future together. The lighthouse around them responded to their emotional state, filling the digital sky with aurora-like displays of color and light. "You may now kiss the bride," Dr. Chen declared, and as Marcus and Emma's avatars embraced, the virtual world erupted in celebration. But it was later, in the real-world reception at Marcus's penthouse, surrounded by flesh and blood friends and family, that the true magic revealed itself. Emma, radiant in a dress that incorporated fiber optic threads to create subtle lighting effects reminiscent of their virtual world, stood before a room full of people whose lives had been touched by their story. "A year ago," Emma said during her speech, "I was a struggling programmer who thought love was just another algorithm I couldn't crack. I created virtual worlds because the real world felt too complicated, too full of variables I couldn't control." She found Marcus in the crowd, her husband in both digital and physical reality. "Then I met someone who taught me that the best love stories aren't about perfect compatibility or ideal circumstances. They're about two people who choose to build something beautiful together, whether that's a virtual lighthouse or a real-world future." Marcus joined her, taking the microphone with a smile that had graced magazine covers, but never felt as genuine as it did in that moment. "Emma created the technology that brought us together, but more importantly, she created a space where I could discover who I was when I stopped trying to be who I thought I should be." The applause that followed wasn't just for the couple, but for the revolutionary idea they represented that in an age of digital connection, the most profound intimacy still came from the courage to be completely authentic with another person. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Marcus and Emma stood on the penthouse balcony, looking out over the city lights that sparkled like their virtual lighthouse. "No regrets?" Marcus asked, thinking of the journey that had brought them from digital strangers to real-world partners. "Only one," Emma replied, leaning against his shoulder. "What's that?" "I wish I could go back and tell the struggling programmer, who was afraid to take risks, that the best things in life happen when you're brave enough to let someone see who you really are." Marcus kissed the top of her head, inhaling the scent of her shampoo and marveling at how much more real this felt than any virtual experience. "She figured it out eventually." "We both did," Emma agreed, then pulled out her phone with a familiar mischievous expression. "Speaking of which, want to go visit our lighthouse? I added a few new features for our honeymoon." Marcus laughed, realizing that their love story would always exist in both worlds, the digital realm where they'd discovered each other, and the physical reality where they'd chosen to build a life together. "Mrs. Sterling, I thought you'd never ask." Quote, as they headed inside to their shared VR setup, the city lights continued to twinkle below, bearing witness to a love story that had begun with code and grew into something more real than reality itself. The last line of code Emma had written in their virtual lighthouse read, "Love.exe successfully installed, running indefinitely." And for Marcus Sterling and Emma Rodriguez, that program would never need an update. The auditorium at Stanford University buzzed with anticipation as Emma stepped up to the podium, adjusting the microphone before addressing the crowd of computer science students, tech entrepreneurs, and media representatives who had gathered for her keynote speech at the International Conference on Digital Human Connection. "When I first started coding," Emma began, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who had transformed from a struggling freelancer into one of the most respected voices in emotional AI, "I believed that perfect algorithms could solve human problems. I spent countless nights writing code that I thought would make people's lives better, never realizing that the most important programs can't be debugged with traditional methods." In the front row, Marcus sat alongside Dr. Chen and several Neuralink board members, watching his wife command the stage with the same brilliance that had first captivated him in their virtual lighthouse. The past year had brought changes neither of them could have anticipated when they'd first exchanged vows in both digital and physical ceremonies. "Emoticore now facilitates over 2 million meaningful connections monthly," Emma continued, clicking to a presentation slide that showed a global map lighting up with user activity. "But the statistics that matter most aren't about market penetration or revenue growth. They're about the suicide prevention interventions our AI has initiated, the long-distance families who maintain emotional bonds through our platforms, and the individuals who've discovered parts of themselves they never knew existed." The audience erupted in applause, but Emma's eyes found Marcus, remembering their private conversation the night before about the responsibility that came with technology that could genuinely transform human relationships. "However," Emma said, her tone shifting to something more personal, "I want to share something that isn't in your conference programs. 6 months ago, Marcus and I discovered we were expecting our first child." Quote, The announcement sent a ripple of excitement through the auditorium, but Emma's next words brought a profound silence. The pregnancy was high risk, and we lost the baby at 20 weeks. During those dark months that followed, the virtual lighthouse where our love story began became our sanctuary in ways I never anticipated when I first coded it. Marcus felt his throat tighten, remembering those nights when they'd retreat to their digital space, holding each other's avatars while processing grief that felt too large for the physical world to contain. Technology didn't heal our hearts, Emma continued, her voice steady despite the emotion behind her words. But it provided a space where we could be completely vulnerable with each other without the pressure of well-meaning friends, family obligations, or professional expectations. Our virtual lighthouse became a place where Marcus could cry without worrying about business associates seeing weakness, and where I could rage at the unfairness of loss without feeling guilty about frightening people who cared about us. She paused, looking out at an audience that was completely absorbed in her story. This experience taught us that Emoticore's true value isn't in creating perfect romantic matches or optimizing compatibility algorithms. It's in providing authentic spaces for human beings to process the full spectrum of emotional experience together. The presentation shifted to show new features that Emma and her team had developed: therapeutic environments for couples dealing with grief, virtual support groups for people facing similar challenges, and AI systems trained to recognize when users needed professional mental health resources. We're launching these therapeutic applications next month, free of charge, because we believe that technology companies have a responsibility to use their innovations for more than profit optimization. As Emma concluded her speech to a standing ovation, Marcus reflected on how their experimental VR dating platform had evolved into something neither of them had envisioned. What began as his attempt to experience authentic connection had become a global resource for human emotional support. Later that evening, as they walked through Golden Gate Park after the conference dinner, Emma turned to Marcus with the expression he'd learned meant she was about to propose something that would change their lives again. "I've been thinking about our next project," she said, taking his hand as they paused beside a pond that reflected the city lights. "Emma Rodriguez Sterling, you just delivered a presentation that's going to be quoted in tech journals for the next decade, and you're already planning something new?" She laughed, the sound carrying the joy that had slowly returned to their lives over recent months. "Remember how we talked about starting a family? What if we approached it the same way we approached Emoticore, by creating something that could help other people going through similar experiences?" Marcus studied her face in the lamplight, seeing the spark of innovation that had first drawn him to her virtual lighthouse. "What did you have in mind?" "A non-profit foundation. We could use our resources to support couples dealing with pregnancy loss, infertility, adoption challenges, all the family-building journeys that don't follow traditional paths. And we could develop VR therapy programs specifically designed for processing reproductive grief." The idea resonated with something deep in Marcus's chest, a desire to transform their personal pain into public purpose. "The Sterling Rodriguez Foundation for Digital Emotional Wellness?" "I was thinking about the Lighthouse Foundation," Emma replied softly, "because sometimes people need a beacon to guide them through dark waters." Marcus pulled her closer, overwhelmed by how this woman continued to surprise him with her capacity for turning personal struggles into innovations that could help thousands of others. "There's something else," Emma said, her voice carrying a different kind of excitement. "Dr. Chen called this afternoon. The beta testing for our grief support VR environments has been so successful that 3 major medical centers want to integrate our technology into their psychiatric departments." "Emma, that's incredible." "And," she continued, barely containing her enthusiasm, "there's interest from the Veterans Administration about developing specialized programs for PTSD treatment." Marcus stared at his wife, realizing that their love story had become something larger than either of them had imagined possible. What started as a billionaire CEO's experiment in authentic connection had evolved into technology that could address some of humanity's most profound emotional challenges. "So we're going to change the world?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "We're going to try," Emma replied, standing on her toes to kiss him with the same passion that had first ignited in pixels and code, but now carried the weight of shared purpose that extended far beyond their personal happiness. As they walked home together, Marcus reflected on how their story had begun with him pretending to be someone he wasn't, only to discover that the person he was pretending to be was actually who he'd wanted to become all along. And Emma, who had created virtual worlds because the real world felt too overwhelming, had learned that the most meaningful realities were the ones you built with someone who saw your authentic self and chose to love it anyway. Their lighthouse still stood in the virtual space they visited together, but now it served a different purpose, not as an escape from reality, but as a foundation for building a better one. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.